Palestine, the Ministry of Health reported that over the last 24 hours, hospitals in Gaza received 50 fatalities and 184 injured as a result of Israeli ongoing bombings. Colombian President Gustavo Petro led a meeting of the Council of Ministers and denounced the recent U.S. attacks on Colombia's anti-drug trafficking policies, calling for unity to defend the region. And in Peru, police forces assaulted journalists and photographers covering the march of thousands of demonstrators protesting against President Dina Boluarte in front of the Peruvian Congress building. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Palestine, the Ministry of Health reported that over the last 24 hours, hospitals in Gaza received 50 fatalities and 184 injured as a result of Israeli ongoing bombings. Through a press release, the health authority stated that several victims remain under rubble and on the roads, while ambulance and civil protection teams are unable to reach them. The organization also explained that the number of fatalities from the Israeli attacks exceeds 66,000, while the number of injured stands over 163,300. For its part, a spokesperson for the European Commission called for the release of all Israeli prisoners, unrestricted access for humanitarian aid, and an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees said on Monday that approximately 500,000 Palestinians remain trapped in Gaza City, in an area of no more than 8 square kilometers. Meanwhile, 70,000 Palestinians are crowded into each square kilometer in areas in the southern Gaza Strip to which Israel is threatening civilians to flee. UNRWA spokesperson Adnan Abu Hasna stated in a United Nations press release that famine has spread from Gaza City to the central and southern Gaza Strip. Abu Hasna called for an immediate ceasefire and for humanitarian aid to be allowed in. And the Global Sumut Flotilla received humanitarian supplies from the Red Crescent, transferred with support from the Turkish Navy as it approaches the Gaza Strip despite military threats and drone attacks. The Global Sumut Flotilla, made up of more than 50 ships with activists, civil society members, and parliamentarians from several countries, seeks to break Israel's blockade on Palestine. The flotilla urged global organizations to coordinate and demand an end to the siege on the Palestinian people. They also made an urgent call to maintain pressure to ensure that humanitarian aid reaches its destination. On social media, the flotilla pointed out that organizations have the capacity to take action, but governments have the responsibility and means to play a stronger, more active role in ending the crisis.
2 tane var. Yani sabah bütün gemilerle
15 children from Gaza arrived in Italy with their families to receive treatment in various hospitals across the European country. This medical evacuation was part of a diplomatic effort by the Italian government to provide medical care to Palestinian children who are prevented from accessing treatment by Israeli genocide. According to health authorities, the children, accompanied by 66 family members, will be treated for various illnesses, mainly respiratory and trauma. For his part, the Italian Foreign Minister provided details and figures on children from Gaza benefiting from the Gaza medical evacuation program.
Mercoledì dovrebbero arrivare 350 e 200 palestinesi.
Between today and Wednesday, we should see the arrival of between 150 and 200 Palestinians. They are children, family members of children who are already hospitalized, and students. So our work continues to try to bring as many people as possible to Italy from Gaza. We continue to increase the number of refugees we welcome. In Italy, we have more refugees than the entire European Union. And we are among the countries in the world, along with Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, that have taken in the most refugees. We move forward in the hope.
In the United States, members of the Jewish community protested in front of the White House in rejection of the visit by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The protesters asserted that Netanyahu's Zionist policies violate the values of their faith. They also expressed that the constant attacks against Gaza and the Palestinian community represent a humanitarian crime that requires the prompt intervention of the international community. Demonstrators also demanded an arms embargo, the protection of civilians, and the promotion of peace in the region. These protests come as Trump and Netanyahu discuss a 21-point plan to end the conflict in Gaza, free prisoners, and dismantling Hamas military capabilities. In other topics, in Indonesia, rescue teams are working hard to free students trapped in the rubble of a collapsed school building in Sidoarjo on Monday 29th. According to the authorities, at least 3 students died, more than 100 were injured, and dozens are still under the rubble. As the rescue of survivors continues, police have discovered bodies trapped in the rubble, so the death toll could increase in the coming hours. A police spokesman informed that the students, aged between 12 and 18, were performing evening prayers in a building that was being extended without authorization when it suddenly collapsed on them. We have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Vietnam, the death toll from Typhoon Boluarte rose to 19, while another 21 people remain missing. Typhoon Boluarte made landfall Monday in the central northern part of the country, bringing rain, strong winds and storm surges. This was a storm with the greatest impact recorded this year. The rainfall increased the threat of landslides and flooding in northern areas. According to official records, 88 people were injured, more than 100,000 homes were affected, and around 10,000 hectares of crops were flooded. The Meteorological Agency forecasts continued rainfall due to the passage of Boluarte toward the capital, increasing the probability of thunderstorms. In Namibia, wildfire in Etosha National Park devastated more than 30% of the protected area, causing the death of wild animals. Etosha National Park is one of Africa's largest nature reserves and home to 114 species of mammals, including endangered black rhinos. According to the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, some 775,163 hectares, equivalent to 34% of the park, have been devastated by the flames since September 22nd. To support the control efforts, the government has assigned 3 helicopters, a tanker truck, and more than 500 soldiers due to the still active fire outbreaks, and is evaluating the possibility of declaring a national state of emergency. In this scenario, the authorities are investigating to determine the causes of the fire, which has spread into areas near Angola. And U.S. weather authorities reported that Storm Imelda and Hurricane Humberto are threatening the Bermuda Islands, the Bahamas, Cuba, and the southern United States with strong winds and flooding. According to forecasts, Hurricane Humberto is expected to produce dangerous waves for the east coast of the United States and the Bahamas, where Storm Imelda is also strengthening. The storm is expected to gradually turn before accelerating east-northeast through Tuesday night and early Wednesday, October 1st. Forecasters added that in the case of Humberto, it could change in intensity before weakening, but that until then it would remain a major and dangerous hurricane. And Colombian President Gustavo Petro denounced attacks against his policies to combat drug trafficking despite the administration's previous efforts to combat this scourge. At a cabinet meeting, President Gustavo Petro reiterated his condemnation of Colombia's desertification in the fight against drug trafficking and highlighted his country's efforts. He warned that Trump's administration is threatening Latin America and the Caribbean to divert attention from the U.S. public health crisis due to high fentanyl consumption. Colombian president also questioned the United Nations' inaction in the face of the systematic violation of international law by the United States and its allies. In the framework of the cabinet meeting, Colombian President Gustavo Petro affirmed the national sovereignty of Colombia and other Latin American countries in the face of interference by the United States.
Y entonces hay una autonomía del manejo de recursos extranjeros en el ejército.
And then there is autonomy in the management of foreign resources in the army and the police. I don't know if they are so benign because they are accompanied by official courses that pay them, as happened in migration, a migration office here in Bogotá, where you go in and find it full of United States flags, and over 100 officials were paid by the United States. That is, it was a United States Customs office with Colombian migration clothing, and we have not made those treaties. It has nothing to do with it. If a country leaves its customs in the hands of another, it is not sovereign. It's that simple, and our anthem says that we are sovereign.
Moreover, President Petro emphasized during the meeting that the United States had no right to deny visas to speak at an official event in the United Nations after his own visa is revoked by U.S. President Donald Trump.
The United Nations does not have to remain in New York. The United Nations Security Council, of which we are almost members and we will preside, and you don't have a visa, nor do I have a visa, then what? Then it is stupidity on the part of the United States government. It is breaking international law, and it has no right to make away the visa of anyone who goes to speak to the United Nations or about issues that are under discussion at the United Nations. That is world law. That is how the United Nations were formed. If Trump forgets that or isn't told or doesn't read about it, then someone should read it to him. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also file lawsuits in the United States, which is breaking international law at the United Nations. The United Nations cannot bow down to a government that is complicit in genocide.
The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, commented on the weekly international events, highlighting that the Caribbean has united in support of Venezuela at the UN against the U.S. military threats. During his weekly TV program, the head of state underscored that a new pluripolar world is being born, and it showed in the addresses given by world leaders at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly that concluded this Monday, which showed large condemnation to the United States' unilateral military aggressions in the Caribbean. He also praised the speech given by Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who, according to him, said what the world needed to hear in his denunciation of the imperialist powers that threaten the future of the planet. During his weekly TV program called Maduro Más, the Venezuelan president referred to Benjamin Netanyahu's speech at the United Nations General Assembly and said it was as if Hitler had gone to the UN to speak about his plans of extermination.
He simply brought out his war plan of extermination against the Palestinians, against the Syrians, against the Lebanese, against the Iraqis, against the Jordanians, against the Iranians, against the whole world. A war plan against the whole world. It was as if Hitler had sat down to speak at the United Nations without his mustache. The only thing missing was his mustache to be Hitler, to say that he was going to exterminate all those he had not yet exterminated.
We have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. The National Association of Journalists of Peru reported on Sunday that police officers assaulted journalists and photographers covering the march of thousands of demonstrators protesting against President Dina Boluarte in front of the Peruvian Congress building. The protests against the government of President Dina Boluarte and the Congress were met with a violent response from the security forces. The National Association of Journalists reported 8 serious incidents, 6 of which were direct physical assaults and 2 were acts of harassment and intimidation against journalists. Sunday's protests united hundreds in opposition to the government, the pension system, corruption, organized crime, and the violence in the country. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador announced Monday the extension of its nationwide strike against the neoliberal and repressive policies of Daniel Noboa's government. During a press conference in Quito, CONAIE's President Marlo Vargas said that dialogue with the government was not an option at this moment and announced a list of 10 demands that the government must meet. Vargas also demanded an investigation by international organizations on the assassination of indigenous community member Efrain Fuertes and called for the immediate end of the massacre against the indigenous peoples. The social leader reiterated that peoples in resistance are not terrorists but heirs to a historic struggle for life, justice, and dignity. And the United States is preparing for a possible federal government shutdown starting next Wednesday, October 1st, due to disagreements among members of Congress over the approval of funds. The budget process in the United States requires Congress to approve a series of 12 appropriations bills each year, which are key to keeping various federal agencies operational. However, this year, none of the 12 bills has been enacted before the legal deadline, which threatens to partially or totally shut down the government. According to analysts, the lack of consensus before the start of the new fiscal year could leave thousands of public employees without pay and limit essential functions in the country. And in the United States, massive social protests continue in rejection of the discriminatory policies of the Donald Trump administration following its intensified persecution of the migrant community. Human rights organizations say migrants are detained arbitrarily, showing a systematic policy criminalizing working families, most of whom are Latin American. Trump's policies have intensified immigration operations, transforming them into mechanisms of intimidation and persecution. The U.S. President recently ordered troops to Portland, Oregon, adding to operations in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Memphis. This increases the presence of military and federal agency forces in cities governed by Democrats. And on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated his threat to impose steep tariffs on films made outside the United States, claiming that his country's film industry has been damaged by others. The U.S. head of state declared that he will impose a 100% tariff on any and all films made outside of the United States. However, no details have yet been provided on his plans, nor a timeline for when these tariffs could be enacted. The measure is an attempt to recover the U.S. film industry, a major sector of the economy affected after the Hollywood strikes and the COVID-19 pandemic. And the National Day and Mid-Autumn Festival holidays have begun, a week that celebrates the birth of the People's Republic of China 76 years ago. The commemorations open with a tribute to the martyrs of that process. Bruno Falsi, our correspondent, brings us more details.
Hello to all that's following us in teleSUR in English. Here in Beijing, the Chinese President Xi Jinping and other leaders of the Communist Party of China and the state attended a ceremony to present flower baskets to fallen national heroes at Tiananmen Square in central Beijing. The event was held to mark China's 12th Martyrs' Day. All participants sang the national anthem and then paid a silent tribute to the martyrs who had sacrificed their lives to the liberation of the Chinese people and the development of the People's Republic of China. 9 huge flowers baskets were placed in front of the monument to the people's hero. Xi and other leaders walked up to the foot of the monument, where he straightened the ribbons on the baskets before leading other senior officers in a walk around the monument to pay their tributes. During the historical period of China Revolutionary War for socialist construction, martyrs have sacrificed their lives for the independence of the country and of the nation, the liberation of the people, the wealth and strength of the Chinese country, and for social justice for all the citizens. According to the statistic, there have been about 20 million national martyrs since the beginning of the Chinese Civil War in 1927 and the Japanese invasion that started in 1931. Due to limitation of wartime conditions, many martyrs have not left their names. Now we go back to the studio in La Habana, Cuba.
Welcome to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.
China and the